you. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, everybody, for sticking around for our panel, which is called How to Build a Blockchain Island. That can mean a number of different things. But we had a call yesterday, and we decided we would talk about how we can work together from different sectors and different disciplines and how to help create a space where people can more easily implement blockchain infrastructure. So I'm going to introduce my esteemed panel. We've got Crystal Rose Pierce, Brian Bourgerie, Cyril Meduna, am I saying that right? Giovanni Mendes, thank you for your talk, Giovanni, and Gail Nolan. Would you each just give a little bit on your background, and then we'll start with the questions.
Sure. I'm Crystal Rose, and I'm the CEO and founder of Sense. We are called Make Sense Labs. We build communication projects and products on the blockchain. So our flagship product is Sense Chat, which is we call it a better messenger. It's blockchain encrypted, and so it has the side benefit of cryptocurrency, but more than anything, it's just a better user experience than having your data stolen and spied on by other large messengers. So we're using blockchain for that purpose. We also have EOS Chat. It's a chat messenger on the EOS blockchain, and Candygram, which allows you to earn tokens on your Telegram chats. So we have been working to improve communications. I'm also on the board of the Integro Foundation, which is a nonprofit here in Puerto Rico, and we're also leveraging blockchain technology in new and innovative ways.
I'm Brian Bourgerie. I moved down here a couple years ago. We brought our hardware company working in decentralized technologies, plug-and-play home servers, things like that, and created another company, an Act 20 company, with Geo actually, as well, where we developed some pretty interesting IP. We came down here for multiple reasons actually. Tax incentives was a component, but dealing in hardware and connectivity and internet and things like that, we realized Puerto Rico was a perfect test bed for the technology as well. So just real quick on that, given the construction, you can see are super thick cement, metal, things like that, hard for connectivity, Wi-Fi, whatever to get through. We figured if we can refine some of our technology in this type of atmosphere and construction, in addition to, we came right shortly after Hurricane Maria and Irma, if we could also help people at the same time in the sense of, hey, maybe this area doesn't have internet yet, and we can put devices in different places that can help propagate and create a mesh. Obviously things have changed as we moved down and whatever. We didn't get to do as much as I wanted, but that was one of the main drivers, is we could create an impact while helping our business in multiple ways and do it in a financially sound manner. So it just kind of all made sense. And it helps that I have an uncle who lives on the small island of Vieques I could visit. But that's what brought us down initially.
My name's Cyril Meduna. I came from Chile to Puerto Rico 35 years ago. There was an Act 20 or 22 then. I came initially to it was my first job out of school, and I came with a Chase Bank. Puerto Rico at that time was in default of their loans also, and the Chase Bank owned, and by default, Rio Mar and Palmas, and it was a big restructuring, and I stayed here for 2 years and then decided to go off on my own and started a venture fund under a very generous tax incentive law that was passed then, where if you invested in the fund and I invested in companies and you lost all your money, you would get all your money back through tax credits. I had no idea what I was doing then, but we raised a $10 million fund, which is an evergreen that's still operating. And then I just kept on, and mostly focused, raised several funds by now, but mostly focused on growth capital for local entrepreneurs. And we started a lot of companies with management teams. We've created probably about 50 companies now in Puerto Rico. Some of them you might be using if your healthcare is MCS. That was one of our companies. We're still a shareholder there. If you're using an AT&T phone, that's running off of the backbone of a company that we started called Centennial. and so forth. So one of the things that I've been focusing on the past years is how to put the technology ecosystem in Puerto Rico kind of on steroids. And we started an accelerator about 5 years ago now called Parallel 18. I don't know if you guys are there. I told you before I was Chilean. I brought up a Chilean guy that was Sebastián Vidal. It's been a huge success here in Puerto Rico. He was running Startup Chile, which is a big program incubator in Chile. And that's kind of I think that's probably the most relevant part of why I would be in a place like this today. Thanks.
I'm Giovanni Mendes. As you saw in my previous presentation, I'm a tax attorney. I work with the local incentives, particularly Act 2022. My count was about working in just over 300 cases total in the last 7-8 years. And then relatively early on, started being exposed to blockchain and cryptocurrency, and then particularly through having Michael Turpin as a client, who is oftenly referred to as patient zero here with Act 22, and being the first crypto investor to move here under the programs. And I took an interest and also made a bet into learning more and educating myself better on the legal and regulatory aspects. It's paid off so far because we can see the constant evolution in this area and technology in general. Locally, we see an impressive amount of key players in the blockchain and cryptocurrency space. I'm glad to represent a lot of them, people that have been either early adopters or early creators in the space. And I do believe that economic development through these tax incentives is very, very possible, and something that is helping and will continue to help the island.
Hello, I'm Gail Nolan. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer for Invest Puerto Rico. We are the attraction marketing agency for industry on the island of Puerto Rico, in global markets specifically, and really focused on the knowledge services side of the sector. So how do we increase that as a future opportunity for the island of Puerto Rico? My personal background is in economic development as a certified economic development professional with the International Economic Development Council. And I came to the island from, just recently, about 9 months ago, and I came from Wisconsin, where for 10 years I was in charge for the state of leveraging disasters towards global competitiveness, specifically in the industries of biotech, aerospace, and IT. And so there's kind of a lot of similar alignment on the island of Puerto Rico, and hopefully we'll talk about that a little later. So.
Thank you, everybody. So we all, I think most of us in this room, when we think of blockchain, we think of it as a tool that can potentially create more democracy, more security, more seamlessness, take out third parties, just make our businesses and our lives better and more cost effective. But there's also the transparency, like I said, aspect. So Crystal, I'd love to start with you and ask about what the Integral Foundation is doing with blockchain in terms of transparency, and if you see that as something that other players in the nonprofit space here could adopt.
Sure. We started the Integral Foundation in 2017. My husband, Brock Pierce, and several others are now involved with moving the organization forward. So in 2017, the first goal was we know that we have a fiscal responsibility to donate and also a passion to be philanthropists. We want to put our money to work in Puerto Rico. How can we best serve? Well, we wanted to, after coming out of stories like Red Cross and Haiti, if anybody has ever heard the story of what happened, $500 million was raised for Haiti, and we talked to their previous prime minister, who was the prime minister at the time when this was happening, Laurent Lamothe, and he goes on stage now with this story because he said, when we called them saying, you guys raised $500 million for us, this is fantastic, could we please have some? They couldn't send any money. For some reason, there was a lot of bureaucracy. They offered maybe $50 million, then $10 million, then $1 million out of $500 million. And you can look it up on Google. It's a terrible yet really impactful story that says the current system is broken. And so not only did we strive to put our money to work in Puerto Rico for the benefit of those who were still, at the time that we came, having issues from the earthquakes, or the hurricane. The earthquakes are our recent project. But we wanted to do it in a way where 100% of those donations were passed through. So we set up an organization that started to value transparency, and we use a product called Paybook Glass, which allows us to hook up our bank accounts, to put all of our projects into one system where anyone can see what is happening and where the money goes. Today, we have 35 organizations in Puerto Rico that we filter donations to. So we're a grant writing organization, 100% pass through. We pay the overhead out of our own pocket, and that is our donation. And that is a new promise that should be made by nonprofit organizations. So for us, it's really important to not only be able to help to create a better economy where we are by being venture capitalists and putting our money to work with entrepreneurs, but also to make sure that donations are being handled responsibly. And small organizations like those repopulating the bees or helping the endangered parrot or the manatees here, that those organizations can get sponsorships as well. And it's not just those who have dollars to create Facebook ads and take on the money.
Brian, so you've got your hands in a number of different crypto and blockchain projects. You said that your phone is just filled with all these apps with crypto projects.
You can call me,
and you brought your company here. Can you elaborate more on why you think Puerto Rico is good testing grounds for blockchain? And beyond the tax incentives, we'll get to the tax incentives in a second, but beyond that, we all know that they're instrumental, but what about this place is good for blockchain?
Yeah, so piggybacking on what I initially said, we brought hardware down, also developed some interesting blockchain IP. So in that sense, it's an awesome testing ground. Piggybacking on that or going with that, when you think about it, there's a big push for solar microgrids. We'll probably hear more about that later, and different renewable energy types of things, and seeing that many times government doesn't or can't function fast enough if there's a disaster or maybe just regularly. But utilizing blockchain to help create, I guess, more connected communities, and not just with people connecting, but in energy sharing or in, it could be data sharing or internet sharing. There's multiple different ways that blockchain can be utilized, and with transparency. And that can be done and should be done, I think, everywhere, but this is a great place to test. One, because there's a greater need than maybe a random other state in the U.S. or other places. But this is also a unique place because we're an island that millions of people from around the entire world travel to. And for me, like some of the apps, I was telling them yesterday, I have a folder of maybe 40 different like fintech, or I call it CRI-fi, crypto finance applications and stuff like that. I like testing out payments, buying things at Office Max with Bitcoin and with a QR code, and just different things like that. Implementing that here in Old San Juan, even where all these cruise ships are coming, people from everywhere in the world, even just having anchor points of places that are utilizing these technologies, whether it's in payments or in another method, and getting that exposure, which then goes back with all these people everywhere in the world, I think is a great area to kind of evangelize blockchain. And if nothing else, people see, oh, that place accepts Bitcoin. What's that? Or, oh, that accepts a stablecoin. What's a stablecoin? Or like all these different things. So even people who maybe have no idea, they're at least getting exposure to it. And this is a great place to do it. Not to mention, I mean, if you're talking about payments and things like that, the transaction fees are going to be better than what you're getting traditionally if you're paying with cryptocurrency most of the time. Obviously, we can go into detail some other time on all that. But there's just lots of different things that can be done, and there's a lot of companies that have come down here, more that are interested, and a lot of projects that are looking to gain exposure, and I think this is a really good test bed for that, and can be an example to the rest of the world, especially places that maybe are more of a third world country, but they do have tourism, or maybe in Southeast Asia, things like that. They can use this as a model and see like, oh, we can implement these different things, and it could be, again, in energy or payments or whatnot, but it's a good way to show that and gain that exposure.
Thank you. So my next question is for both Cyril and for Giovanni, even though you're going to have two different perspectives on it. From from building a startup ecosystem standpoint, and then from taxes and regulatory issues, do you see any major gaps here, as well as the rest of the Caribbean, that need to really be closed in order to implement blockchain more and attract more blockchain talent?
This is obviously a lead-up question to something. So there's a presentation. I don't know if it's up there. So one of the things that we found, so we started this accelerator. We're bringing 40 companies every 6 months from mostly Latin America, tech companies, then we put up a fund. We raised $20 million to invest in these companies so they would stay in Puerto Rico and hire people here. And then when we went to talk to them after we gave them the money, they said, well, we're going, where are you spending the money? We needed to go to Medellin, or we needed to go to Bulgaria, and because we couldn't hire any coders here in Puerto Rico. And we spent a year with my partner. I don't know if you can switch. Is there a clicker anywhere? So I don't know, Adam Bergman, he's a Law 20, there you go. Now we can get it to work.
Did you break it? What this?
Maybe turn it on. There you go.
Turn it around.
Okay, so here's a problem we ran into, right? There was no, that way? There was no human talent. So what's the problem was a solution. We went to the universities, to UPR, we went to Sagrado Corazon, and tried to convince the people there to do coding, hardcore coding. They were doing programming, but it's mostly computer science. And we for 2 years, very frustrated, and yesterday at the Chamber of Commerce, in a panel where all the presidents of the universities were, we had our director announced that we were bringing down a full-stack coding school. It's a 2-year program. We teamed up with Hoverton in San Francisco. It's a program that's 90% online. Students have to go to class because there's group teaching and project working together. The real neat thing about this is, here's a curriculum. I don't understand what much they're going to study there, but the important thing here is that we're going to be providing this free of tuition charges while the kids are studying. And it doesn't have to be kids. It can be people that are working in pharmaceuticals that are getting laid off. There's a huge banking consolidation that's going to happen. It's happening, and those people can go and take these 2-year courses. No tuition, and you don't pay until you get a job, and you have to earn more than $30,000 in order to start paying. And once you get there, you start paying us back. We're still figuring out the math. In Puerto Rico, it's a little different because programmers, coders are getting paid less, but you're going to have to pay for about anywhere from 40 to 60 months of salary, for 40 to 60 months, a certain percentage of your salary to give money back to a school so that we can keep training new students. We think that, the faces of the university people there was quite amazing, especially when we said it was going to be free. They kind of whom and howed, but I think it's going to be an important part to get the ecosystem in Puerto Rico going, because the educational part is surely missing.
Yeah, and Giovanni, I know you work with a lot of successful tech entrepreneurs like Michael and other people in the ecosystem here, but not everybody has that experience or that knowledge or the network that some of the more seasoned entrepreneurs here have, particularly in blockchain. Are there any gaps here in the landscape that you see that could be addressed from either a private sector standpoint or more of a grassroots standpoint?
Well, there could be gaps which are regulatory gaps into, if you want to establish here and or higher or whatnot, regulation-wise, what can assist that way. But I also think there's maybe turning it around a little bit. If not for these programs existing, then these problems maybe wouldn't be identified. And we could also see, as the programs have evolved, I think the reality is that blockchain technology would not have the strong presence it has in Puerto Rico. Even it could be bigger, but the presence that exists because of tax incentives programs. The first interest that came here. Once these companies come in, even if there's a circle of success, failure, some leave, some stay, the knowledge that is brought with these companies, that stays. That sparks interest in young entrepreneurs or young students to create EduBlock, which is born out of universities, or to identify these needs, or then want to train, because normally you also want to train in what exists and what could potentially be something where you could have economic benefit. So those gaps to fill also become evident because of the presence. And I think that that's important, very important thing. I think you could compare, and then probably Cyril can say a little bit more about this. But 30 years ago, when we had a large manufacturing presence in Puerto Rico, a lot of things that now we don't have. It's still big in the Puerto Rican economy, but although factories have left, things that were taught to the workers and managers of these companies, that led out to start, people learned supply chain or Six Sigma, or things that they say, well, we could apply this to a bakery, and now have, one of the largest bakery distributions here in Puerto Rico. So and that's knowledge that's brought in, again, through this presence. So I know I turned around the question a little bit, but it wouldn't be evident unless we had these rising needs.
Kind of a great foundation to get things going, and hopefully building a blockchain island, like we said. In regards to building the blockchain island, again, I still have hopes that Puerto Rico can be a blockchain island, but we definitely, first of all, there has been regulation that has happened, and we probably haven't promoted it enough, because back in 2015, yes, we did get, for example, an Act 20 company approved to launch an ICO, and that ICO, the sale of the tokens would be treated as offering a service, and that would solve tax issues. Well, that was big. We maybe should have promoted that, but not only that was something that was negotiated directly, maybe at a very high level, but just last summer, the incentives code now explicitly says blockchain technologies, development of blockchain technologies, it says cryptocurrencies. So we need to promote that a lot more, because, maybe you could say, oh, well, it's the same, we get to the same point we used to get to anyway. Well, no, globally, we should see, hey, this jurisdiction that is part of the US, that has this unique scenario, they're paying attention to blockchain and cryptocurrencies, and they're legislating in favor. Of course, yes, I would personally hope I think we've joked around how we should just basically have a bill that says that anything Wyoming approves will translate and approve immediately, just to get it done quickly. That's not how government works. That's not how politics work. So we need a lot more of that. So it's twofold. One is it's promoting outside of Puerto Rico that, yes, the government, has paid attention. They formed the Blockchain Advisory Council at one point. The OSIF, which is a regulator, and normally regulators are tough. Well, they issued guidance on, how you could get this approved. So they are willing to work with this. And then we also need to prove to government and regulators that it's worth it, that it is producing the economic development, and that people are complying, they are taking this seriously, because, if we treat it like if it's gamification, it's levels that we're passing and are being improved till we get to that greater prize, and then potentially still rescue that blockchain island trademark
which Michael, as a pioneer, had once announced Puerto Rico as a blockchain island in collaboration with Microsoft a few years back. We kind of lost that trademark. I hope we could still regain it, and particularly from the U.S. perspective.
Gail. So I know when we talked, you said, you're not a blockchain expert. Neither am I. I only write about it from a humanitarian standpoint. But just considering everything that Invest Puerto Rico is doing to bring more investment to this island and your focus on knowledge services, where do you think blockchain can be the most useful?
So, based on my background and based from a strategic perspective, we tend to look at these things very much from a market driving force perspective as opposed to opportunity perspectives. And so one of the things, I think everyone here in this room really understands the energy component of how that application would look on the island of Puerto Rico. But one of the things, when we look at market driving forces, we will look at existing assets on the island, which the pharmaceutical industry is a huge asset. 14 of the top 20 multinational pharmaceutical companies, and just to kind of backtrack a little bit, the way that they operate is there's 14 companies, but each of those companies has multiple lines on the island. There's over 100 lines that are being produced on the island, and those lines shift back and forth to facilities all over the world. And as we've lost the concentration on the island, in the pharmaceutical industry, we're losing lines to other locations, and those lines are literally physical infrastructure that's not being utilized on the island. So there's an opportunity there in terms of how do we manage that from a contract manufacturing perspective, and how could blockchain be part of defining that global supply chain into that excess capacity, and specifically important from a blockchain perspective and from the security perspective and from the transparency perspective, because of the requirements of FDA and clean room requirements and confidentiality between companies. You'd really be able to have, you need to have a pristine system to be able to use that excess capacity. On the flip side of that, because of the disasters on the island, a lot of the companies that are multinationals are starting to relook at their footprint on the island of Puerto Rico from a downtime perspective. And so an example of that is many of them are doing dual sourcing on all of their lines. And if you're dual sourcing in an industry like pharmaceuticals or biotech, you have to it's not just saying that you know where there are supply chain alternatives. You actually have to pay 24/7, 365 days of the year to have another facility that's ready for your line to go into that facility. And so there's a lot of cost involved with that. And to put that into scale, companies like Medtronics have 60 companies globally. There are 6 of them on the island of Puerto Rico, but it's 20% of their global productivity. And so from that perspective, they need to make sure that they've got assured lines that can be utilized. So instead of when companies like Medtronics has to dual source to other locations, that's a risk factor for the island of Puerto Rico, because those lines can then easily move to those other locations. And so how do we secure that in a way using blockchain as kind of like a virtual network of capable and qualified dual source locations that are not needing to be fully one-to-one relationship based, but network based, so that if a company has a need, they can find that location somewhere globally that fits all of that criteria and can be managed through blockchain. So again, to me, there are multiple opportunities in that way that are they'd be good transition strategies, utilizing existing assets and needs on the island, and marketing that to blockchain professionals in terms of here's a huge market opportunity on the island of Puerto Rico because of the connectivity to this industry that would have global implications.
Great, I just got the 5-minute signal. So really quickly to touch on a couple of points that all of you made. I mean, in my ideal world, I would love to see blockchain facilitate decentralized energy for the entire island. And there are some projects like that going on, and they're really amazing. So I think that because of things like this, Puerto Rico actually has an opportunity to be a part of the global conversation around energy and water and disaster relief from a decentralized perspective. You all bring very different backgrounds and expertise to the table. What would you like to see happen in, say, the next 5 to 10 years in Puerto Rico with regard to blockchain?
In general, and I hope blockchain can facilitate this in a quicker way, I would like to see the island be self-sufficient. So it's a really basic goal, but right now we are reliant on imports for nearly everything. Energy is in a very bad place, as we can see. Most people are now getting generators, but solar is a better solution. Self-sufficiency is important. So when we talk about building a blockchain island, part of the reason why we moved here, of course, is the Act 20 and 22 incentives, and being very familiar with the crypto space. It was great for our companies, great for this new financial medium that is still very under-regulated and in flux with the government, and Puerto Rico is the right place for it. And also, when we wanted to think about our capital coming back and in a full circle, creating Integro organization, the foundation was created. We have our Puerto Rican partners here. One of our executive directors is a PhD in marine biology, and she was very passionate about facilitating investment into the island and donations, and crypto is a great way to do that. So if you have an Act 22 donation to make, or an Act 20 donation to make, everyone is responsible for one every year, you can put it into the organization straight through with crypto, and the crypto can be tracked, and that way you can see where your money is going. So if you choose that you think that energy and power is the thing that's going to bring the island together, then you can put your donation towards that. If it's food and food abundance, we have a lot of programs for food as well. So just being able to watch your dollars in action, I think, is the first step for everyone to create that sustainability, and being very, very aware. Go to your local farm-to-table restaurant. It's extremely important that we are encouraging all of the agriculture to continue to flourish. Eventually, we want to be a net exporter of food, not a net importer, and that's where we are right now. So where can blockchain help with that? Well, I hope that the food supply chain and other supply chains can be improved. Government as well, that's an entire other major topic of discussion, but if we were to have an open data initiative on the island, things like Telegram Gate, or however we want to form the, last year what has happened, that wouldn't happen. We have proposed, actually, within our tribe, many of us had sat in front of the administration proposing open data initiatives, and we still continue to push forward that message. Open data is another one. So, holistically, Blockchain Island is Blockchain Island because there's every single facet can be touched and improved.
Just going with that, I mean, working together, like, there are a lot of different projects and a lot of different people and things that happen. I mean, Drew and I started doing events, just bringing entrepreneurs together, but even just specifically in the blockchain sphere and technology in general, there's a lot of awesome projects that I've found, and maybe it's just by happenstance or an event or something like that, but I've realized a lot of the people coming down who are coming from everywhere and starting up at UPR and Maiguez out west and other places, bringing everyone together and then helping each other in their initiatives. Like, for example, we did Hack Democracy a couple years ago. There's some cool things built out for transparency for government and other things like that, but they only get so far. So if we can help each other out in this, because you guys know way more than I do for like probably regulators and things like that, but if we can help kind of push each other's projects forward just to get them established more, that's only going to augment and lay a really strong foundation for new companies that are developed here or who come down here, and we can really push forward together in getting these things done. And Gio might hit on this or someone else, and then the regulatory side, I mean, obviously the easier government can make things, even on the most simple level, for turnkey business starting and permitting or whatever it is, that obviously is just going to help everything in a great way as well.
Thank you. So we've got self-sufficiency, pushing each other's projects forward. We should be off the stage now, but I want everybody to get a chance to go really quickly. 5 to 10 years, how will this be a blockchain island? What would you ideally like to see happen here?
I've been, word of caution, okay? I've been, when you're sitting in an island like this and gone through a lot of cycles, economic activity that's stimulated by tax incentives, which is Law 20 and Law 22, which the one for individuals is 20, right? 20, 22. If that goes away, we'll lose a lot of the activity, right? So, and because there's no incentive for people to stay here otherwise. The incentive that stays is the ones where you build up human talent, right? If you build up the human talent, people will stay. The minute that's not here and the tax incentives goes away, we'll lose it. It happened, I've seen it happen 3 times, 3 cycles, so be wary of the change in the laws. So if you're going to build a sustainable economy and a sustainable business here in the island, you have to develop the local talent, okay? So for me, that's probably the most important. And by the way, blockchain is a very appealing, so we don't have any natural resource. I mean, 5, maybe 10% is your goal for tourism, but it's not going to be more than that, right? Well, but, economic activity. But we're not going to live off of that, so we need to create other industries. And the other talent we have is humans, and we got great artists, we got great musicians, so the talent's there, just has to be educated in other areas, right?
Since I have to be quick, I'm just going to steal this off the call we had yesterday because to me it was an aha moment and I think it was brilliant. We were talking about interconnecting Puerto Rico as a blockchain island with Latin America and the U.S. in general. We're a multicultural, multilingual island. There's already a lot of interest in blockchain and cryptocurrency in countries like Venezuela and Argentina because of the lack of transparency issues they have and because of economic issues. So us, we've always dreamt as an island throughout these cycles that we can be the connector of the Americas. Maybe this is another opportunity to, again, and I'm going to insist on regulation, but through regulation, through government being open to this, and then business as well. The Latin America kind of looking up. Okay, this is how we penetrate the U.S. markets, and we are the connector. So that would be something I'd love to see.
Great, and thank you. And very quickly, I would totally agree. It's about the talent and the workforce, and because I'm always. My cautionary is always to be concerned about when anything rests on political policy or political requirements for where the future goes, because if you strengthen your markets and you strengthen your economy, those other political factors will align to that as opposed to the other way around, that the markets will drive. And so if markets are driven by talent and talent can really be an important component of building the island as a blockchain island, and that gives us the connectivity then in terms of being that broker between Latin America and other global markets. So
That's a good note to end on. We went over time, but I think it was well worth it. So thank you to my panelists, and thank you everybody for joining us.